The liver is, I think, the most fascinating organ. It is the only organ in the entire body that if you were to cut in half, it could completely regenerate. Everyone needs help with their liver, but no one's talking about it. You want to make sure that your liver is not stored with a bunch of crap. The IVs, every single IV supports the liver. Having a sluggish liver doesn't help, but you don't want to wait too long to do something about it. Sleep and the liver are like the only two ways you can detox the brain.
Sleep is still like will always be the next frontier in a sense. Like you could always do better in sleep. Sleep is the best health insurance you can buy.
Baldo and I strategically created an environment that was a community from the second you walk in, and that was our business model.
Because the environment is just as important as anything else for health.
What people don't realize with holistic health is that the patient is the consumer. You're no good to anyone else unless you take care of yourself first thing in the morning. The doctors were like, where are your labs telling you this? I'm like, bro, this is biochemistry. Like, if you didn't understand biochemistry, I'm sorry, but we're way ahead of you right now.
Well, thank you, Baldo and Jonathan, for joining us. If we could start with an intro of your journey. You started in a broom closet, and then you migrated to backstage IVs in the Austin area. What's the wildest moment from your journey that made you think we really made it?
Okay, we were at the ACL festival one year. We had gotten hired by them to take care of their staff, and as a reward for a good job done, we got to go on the headliner stage. And I remember Balder and I were sitting on the stage. Our staff was there, and it was some artist, biggest name in the world, right? And I say this because I didn't know any of his music, but like Shaq was there. We're like partying with Shaq on the headliner stage. Balder and I kind of look at each other because we're exhausted at this point, and he leans over and he says a little joke to me that only me and him would get. And I saw it. I sat there and I was like, man, like even if we came back to this festival, which Balder and I used to always go as when we were younger, I said we got paid to go to this time, and then we got to experience like everything, like just from an apex standpoint, there's nothing better. So to me, I was like, maybe we've made it at this point, or have we done something now to at least be in a position to be able to do something like this, right?
You started with free B12 shots. How did that single decision transform your entire business trajectory?
Oh my gosh. Well, if this is what the joke was. So like the internal joke between Baldo and I is he leans over, he goes, free B12 shots, bro. And the funny thing is, from a business standpoint, they've always told you don't give away things, right? When you're starting off in business. Well, B12 injections are nothing new. It's just everyone sells them for $20 to $30. And Baldo and I looked at each other and said, we have to stand out. So what if we made them free, but it led like to getting them in the door, and then it led to them buying something else, right? And it worked, and it was genius, and it basically got us to be on stage there to where we got paid, and we got this like really cool setup, and it was against everything that we were told, right? Don't give away free stuff, and we did, and it's led to so many doors opening to it for us.
It's one of those things, isn't it, that a lot of the things that we're told to do often might have worked before or might have worked in certain other industries or for different products. But sometimes the best thing we can do is try something out of the box and do something that makes sense. We'll give it a go, see if it works. If it does, it takes us down that route. If it doesn't, we try something new anyway. So it sounds like you guys did obviously the right thing for thinking out the box, trying something different.
Yeah, I mean, business is it's like a blank canvas when you start off. And I really like that approach because, we're all artists at heart, right? When you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to create something that's maybe not there, and you have to explain it 1,000 times before somebody understands it. And so like having, the creativity is one thing and having the execution is another, right? And so when you think about these wonderful ideas, I've also learned that you have to have a bunch of ideas, right? You can't just have one because you're going to have to adjust. Your business plan is going to change, and this is stuff that we all knew at the beginning. However, once you're in like the trenches and you're there every day, imagine you have to like, we were called ballerinas at one point because we literally had to pivot a different direction like every other month.
Why do you believe IV nutrition is a game changer over traditional supplements or medication?
Um, well, let's see here. I think vitamins are the best way to get into the bloodstream through the IV. There's no other way that's more powerful. So it's almost 100% absorption rate. And what we've seen is that it's given us almost instant results. And here we want instant gratification. And so when somebody spends their hard-earned money on a product or service, they want to walk out knowing that, hey, this was worth it. And so our vitamin IVs, I'm proud to say that usually people come in not feeling their best and they leave feeling incredible. And so, to me, I love what I do, right? And it's still more of a newer thing in a lot of cases. So like educating someone on why and the benefits is still like one of our passion things.
Speaking of like education, some people speaking about a friend here, not me by any means, are afraid of needles. And how do you kind of like putting something in your mouth versus getting an injection? How do you kind of like tell that story? Like, this is better for you, nothing to worry about.
You have to look at it this way. It's elective, right? So I guess the benefits outweigh, I guess, the person, wanting to say that they have a phobia of needles, because I swear it's usually the women who go through with the IVs. I swear it's the men, like they back out the last minute. Yeah, it does. Right? And they have tattoos and everything. And I'm like, wow, what is it about this needle as opposed to a tattoo? And they say, well, it's different. It goes in deeper. And I say, I get that. But one thing I made a point, especially when Baldo and I started off, was I said, this is elective, which means we have to be kind of white glove. This cannot hurt. We don't want to bruise. We don't want to miss. We want this to be as painless as possible to where they walk out smiling. And what's really fascinating, because this was so new, imagine this is kind of right before when like Instagram was just getting started with influencers, and they don't really want you showing someone getting an IV started, right? Because it's still, traumatic for some. But one of the things we always showed was people smiling during and afterwards, and it made people more relaxed. And one other thing, we actually have an open kind of treatment room. It's an IV like lounge. And so you're literally sitting across from people who are getting an IV as well. And it opens the door for like maybe a relaxed environment where people start like conversing amongst each other almost, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Like a sense of community. You can do anything together. Um, how long does the whole process take?
Process, it can be anywhere from 45 minutes up to about 2 hours, just depending on what you're getting in the bag. There's some things that make it run longer. There's some people who like in and out. They want to get in as quickly as possible, and other people, they like coming here because it's relaxing for them. I mean, they don't have to look at their cell phone, they don't have to pay attention to their kids, and a lot of people are sick, so they come in, they're needing like a pick me up, and then the last thing they need to do is do more work on the computer. You know what I mean? But we give them plenty of time to like relax and everything. So I think it's a way to kind of almost like tune in rather than disconnect, if that makes sense.
It's kind of a double output there. It's the value that they're getting from the IV itself, but also the not needing to be on their phones and maybe being in a community, being kind of distracted from their lives for a while whilst they're there.
Yeah. Well, like, I don't know how y'all envision community, but to me, in Baldo, it's very important. It's probably the most important thing in health. And Baldo and I strategically created an environment that was a community from the second you walk in. And that was our business model, like, hey, this is a welcoming place. Anyone is welcome. You're going to feel better when you leave here. And it all started, and you ought to see the before and after of our actual physical brick and mortar. Before, it looked like a dive bar, like a dorm room meets a dive bar. And now it's very nice. And the people who have seen the transition, they know that we put detail into the color. Like, we have greenery, we have plants everywhere, we have bird feeders, we have trees in the background, and always music playing. So it's, Balder and I have this really big thing for music because it soothes us.
Yeah, we always had like house music going on, or like, I mean, we used to have speakers even outside so people can like start getting into the environment as like they're walking up the stairs or whatever. And it's like you're coming in, you're having fun, like you're like, because otherwise the clinics are very like sterile usually, and it's just like, here's, fill out this paperwork and just wait till your turn. And because we also have a bar, like a vitamin bar, so it feels like you can come in and order drinks just like any other bar, except that you're ordering vitamin drinks, and they all have like names like chill, or neuro or something, or we change the menus because like we'll do pop-ups as well, and we'll do exactly the same drinks, we'll just change the names, maybe add a couple of things more just to like fit whatever the events going on. And so like we just want to make that environment, because the environment is just as important as anything else for health.
Mm. And it all fits together. What would you guys say if you think about holistic health holistically as a whole? What's one misconception that you think there is about holistic health, and how would you counter it?
That people think that it's expensive. So I say that knowing that I'm in a very nice part of town and I offer services that are not covered by insurance. And that was all by design. I feel that what people don't realize with holistic health is that the patient is the consumer and they have the power to decide how they want to apply their money towards a treatment, right? Which is an investment in their overall well being and their function. And most of the time, even with the vitamin IVs, we want people just to go outside and go exercise and walk around and be in the sunlight and not be at their desk for 6, 7 hours a day, you know, and with biohacking and the movement now going into more of the, active performance lifestyle that people are looking for with the wearable devices, people are wanting to find out ways to maybe hack their way or cheat their way into health. And I'm like, you can't outrun sleep and you can't outrun sunlight. Like at the end of the day, you still got to get that in somehow.
Yeah, we're still biological creatures at the end of the day that need those things. That's never going to go.
Yeah, we need rest.
Speaking of which, you've treated athletes and celebrities like you mentioned. What's one health secret they swear by that the rest of us might be missing?
They really do like the vitamin IVs. I'm not going to lie. They've noticed it's a big performance enhancer, and it's a natural one. And what's cool about it, it's legal because it's just vitamins. There's no harmful medications or illegal substances that we're giving. And what's great about it is we're not just looking at like, you know, football and basketball players. We have ultra runners, that run 50, K races, or they run Ironman, and they're always looking for PRs. A lot of our friends lately have been doing this high rocks, which is kind of like CrossFit. And it's been really, I don't know. It takes their performance to another level. And what's interesting is, like, we love working with athletes because you don't have to convince them, right? With a lot of people, you have to convince them, hey, this will be good for you if you do this 3, 4 times over the next couple months. You got to come in, but they're going to say, oh my gosh, I don't know if I have time. An athlete will say, if it helps me perform better, I'll go run through a wall. Like if that's what it takes, tell me a protocol, tell me what I need to do. And so I like working with people like that because I like people being accountable. And the other thing with a holistic care that you asked, what's the other thing that people have a misconception about? You need accountability from the patient and you need it from the practitioner as well. So there's a two-way like communication pattern, which I don't think you find in traditional medicine. I think it's like very one way, like the doctor said this, I didn't get to ask this, I didn't get to say this, they didn't check this, and I felt like this didn't happen because, every one of the clients that comes in, I'm a good listener, right? So it's like they won't even tell me what's wrong. I have to dig it out of them. But when you do, holistically, you establish like a relationship of communication, and that's when the healing kind of starts, really.
I wonder what you think about this a saying in the kind of medical world that there's either treatment that works or there's treatment with no side effects. So my understanding is that with IV vitamins, you're not really getting side effects. So I wonder what you'd say to that statement.
That's funny. So one at like medical, right? They ask, what are the side effects? I'm like, well, you have more energy, you have better sleep, your muscles aren't as sore. They're like, no, no, no. What are the side effects? I'm like, those are the side effects. Like, you can have positive side effects, right? Um, just like stress, everyone says stress is such a negative thing. I'm like, honestly, you use it to your advantage because that's how you get promoted. That's how you, push yourself starting off in business. Baldo and I, we worked what, 60, 70 hours starting off when we're, and there was no one saying, hey, guess what? Time to clock out. Like we were like, no, we have to keep going because we're almost there. I feel like if we got some more rest, though, we can maybe come back and hit it hard tomorrow and maybe we'll think even better. So, overall, most of the things that we try to promote to people are very basic. The athletes, they overdo themselves just like the people who work 60, 70 hours. We're trying to get them to go to bed early and lay off the junk food.
What are your thoughts on the biohacking kind of trend. I don't know if it's fair to call it a trend, but it certainly seems to be getting more popular with like Netflix shows. And I'm just seeing stuff in social media and stuff like some people taking 50, 60 pills a day. And it seems like anyone, I forget if I get these numbers right, but it's like anyone born now could realistically live to like 120 based on the trajectory. Is this all like pie in the sky, or are you seeing some actual evidence that this might be the case?
Yeah, so first of all, we we're around that world quite a bit. We get invited to. I mean, part of our growth has been the fact that a lot of biohacking like events or conferences invite us to come do IV therapies, and within the IV therapies, there's different ingredients like NAD plus, for example. That's like can be termed like the longevity vitamin in a sense, and people want to do that all the time, and so like, hey, can you guys come and administer that during our conference? And so we'll do things like that, and it's very helpful, and it's great to like communicate with those type of people that are always like thinking about like what else can I do to like extend my health by like just a little percentage, because then they want to do all those things. But having said that, there's also like a lot of just like fluff out there that people just want to like not everything works. You shouldn't have to try everything. And so you gotta, I don't want to say take it with a grain of salt, because a lot of that stuff does work, but like the things that I feel, or I think John, you would agree with this, that work the best are the things that are trying to like optimize, like, let's say like red light therapy, right? Like it's great, it's fantastic. All it's doing though, it's optimizing your ability to get sun, right? Like, there's for us, there's like sound therapy beds, right? And all that's doing is using sound, right? Like it's not doing anything crazier. It's just optimizing your ability to intake of that. And so I think that, yes, there's a lot to that. I think that people should try all the things, but little by little, not go crazy about it. And as far as like living to 120, like that's been one of my goals since forever. And I think that we can reach it. I don't know if it's like a set, like, hey, everyone born after 1985 or something like that is definitely going to live to 120, because like you still have to do the things. And if anything, I think that there's a lot of just more stress now, right? Like the fact that like people are just on social media all the time. They're like taking in all this blue light all the time. Like they don't get as deep rest. And so maybe the ability to live longer is there, but it's like, are you also making sure that you're not having to do all the, like, are you making sure that you're not doing all the bad things that won't let you get to you there? But I think the ability will be there for sure.
That's interesting. I think the balance eludes us, and I think there's like a balance to be considered in terms of the quality of life and how you're living. Jonathan mentioned community. There's you might be familiar. There's a community in southern Japan, in Okinawa, that has like on average, I guess, the longest lifespan, or among the longest lifespans as a community in the world. And they're trying to figure out like what's their secret. Is it this algae that they're eating that no one else is eating, or is it the community? And they said it's a bit of both. It's the lifestyle that they have. They in older age, like 80s or whatever, 90s even, they're like playing like kids. They're like all, and they've known each other for close to a century at that point. And that's, looking back at our kind of evolution, that's how we've been, like hunter gatherer, tribes. And then we got kind of siloed. And so it's just kind of noticing, maybe we could bring back community a little bit more, perhaps. You mentioned sleep, sunlight, exercise. You're not going to like inject or take pills to completely like replace that, probably. So yeah, just I guess keeping the balance in mind.
Yeah. The Going back to the biohacking aspect of it, we didn't know that we were a part of that movement until one day we realized people were coming in and calling us that. And I was quickly like, I'm not a biohacker. I'm a person of science. I like labs. I order labs on everyone. I like glucose readers. I like studying the heart. I find it fascinating. There's electricity in both the heart and the brain. But no one talks about the liver. And what's fascinating, there's no medicine really concerning the liver. There's no, therapies talking about the liver, and everyone wants to, go straight to like Ozempic or peptides, or, they want stem cells. And I'm like, you know what? Let's take a look at your diet. You probably ate healthier recently, but when you grew up, We all had our stories, right? We ate junk food.
Sloppy Joes.
Yeah, sloppy joes, right? I had tarts for breakfast. I had, Eggo waffles with the syrup and the diet. I had Dr. Pepper every day. I'll be honest. Like
Captain Crunch cereal.
yeah, Captain Crunch. Like you think about it, my parents bought me everything I wanted because it had like a cartoon character without, my favorite cartoon character on it. Marketing works. So you imagine that you also know that these kids grew up to be adults now, or we're doing things that involve high functioning performance on a daily basis, right? So the biohacking thing is like people want to keep their stressful life and enjoy it, but they don't want to really make time for sleep. They want to keep doing everything they're doing, they just don't want to cook at home, so they get everything door dashed, right? And I'm like, what's fascinating about it is if you look at some of the healthier things that still hold true to this day, I'm really like, I'm getting people to like consider yoga, consider chiropractic, consider red light, only because you need it as a maintenance. You need it as a preventative. And now biohacking is so mainstream that I mean, you're talking about it, right? We're talking about it. Everyone. Like, you hear what Rogan said, you hear what Mel Gibson said, do you hear what, these guys are doing? And the doctors had no interest in this conversation. Like when we started off, they didn't want to know, why would I give glutathione or NAD plus injections? The doctors were like, where are your labs telling you this? I'm like, bro, this is biochemistry. Like if you didn't understand biochemistry, you didn't understand nutrition. If you don't understand nutrition, I'm sorry, but we're way ahead of you right now, right? Because we're not deficient in Prozac, and that's the reason why we can't get out of bed in the morning.
Again, it comes back to the different variables that go into it, right? It's our sleep, it's our sunlight, it's our exercise, it's our diet. And I'm sure for different people, those variables are slightly different as well, right? For the individual knowing, I might need 8.5 hours sleep, somebody else might need 7.5 hours sleep, for example. But knowing what we need to be of our optimal functionality. It kind of links to a question I was going to ask you when you were saying about the 60, 70-hour weeks that you were working when you first got started. How did you balance the stress of that and the time of that with your health? How did that go?
It was a priority. Baldo and I made it a priority. Baldo, how many days of yoga in a row have you done now?
Yeah, it's been a few years now. Well, I stopped counting.
Over 10 years. Baldo and I have been working together for like, what, 8 or 9 years. And so, like, he introduced me to yoga because I was going to the gym all the time. He could do handstands and go to sleep, and I couldn't. And I was like, what is going on? So I started doing yoga. I started crying at the end of my workouts. I was like, I've never done this in the gym before, but now I can sleep. So what's going on? So after a while, I realized, like, I don't know everything. Okay, I'm here to learn. Let's learn more about the human body, and let's connect the mind, the body, and the spirit to the brain, the heart, and the liver, right? So when I started like talking to Baldo about yoga, I started understanding, where he was coming from, because as a chiropractor, which I'm also a chiropractor, I know about, meridians and acupuncture and nerves. And there's never an account for like how stress gets a hold of you in a way to where it shuts down your whole body. But that's what it did to me years ago. And I have no choice but to do this, because if I have insomnia, if I have a nervous breakdown again, it's because it was my fault. I looked at my genetics, I looked at my labs, I looked at my diet. I've changed my diet every year. I measure my sleep because I know if I get good sleep, then I can function, and I'm lowering my risk of getting dementia, which that means I can function for many years. And what I try to tell people, even because I do this, I try to tell people in my consults when I work with clients, I say, you're no good to anyone else unless you take care of yourself first thing in the morning. And so the last thing, which Baldo will talk on, was the morning routine. I established the morning routine after basically seeing Baldo's routine. And I was like, okay, you keep talking about how you do everything before you start your day. Maybe that's what I should do. And I even have a family too. So I'm like, wow, like even 10 minutes to myself first thing in the morning when I get up makes the biggest difference in the world.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, well, first of all, like there's about 6 different things that I end up doing, and I don't know how many, John, you're doing now, but meditations has been a big thing for me for even longer than yoga, and so a little bit of movement's another one, right? And but like my process is usually like meditate first thing, like I drink some water first thing, meditate, and then within that meditation, I sit down and do a prayer, and also like do some visualization as well. And So those are like already three things in there. And then after that, I do some reading, some journaling, and then the movement is also the last thing that I end up throwing in there. But like even I made a post about this on X the other day about how like even on days that I'm just in a rush, then I'm gonna do at least a minute of that of each of those things, or read just like one paragraph, or like, and the way that I developed the journaling one, because that was the hardest one for me, is that I was like I made a commitment to at least open my journal and write like I don't feel like writing today, and then close it. And like a few times, five times ever have I ever written that and just close it. Most of the time, I'll like write a second or a third sentence. Like, but I guess I could like talk about this really quick and just keep writing. And so that's how I developed that habit. But like to answer your question, David, about like I forgot, maybe Becky, you asked this, but just the idea of like how do you keep motivated? And it's really interesting that like when you're working with purpose, it's so much easier to just like work all night and then wake up and just be like fully rejuvenated and ready to go again, as opposed to like if you're trying to do that because you've been working at a job that like you hate and like you just have to meet more deadlines and like there's no purpose, then you're just going to feel tired and exhausted because there's nothing else to uplift you. But at least if you give yourself some time in the morning, it'll help.
Yeah, that's brings me back to balance, Bardo. About you're talking about your journaling there, your visualization, and like Jonathan mentioned, you're like mind, body, spirit, and your brain, your heart, and your liver. Jonathan, could you maybe? I mean, it sounds maybe silly, but just take us from the top. Like, what is the liver? We hear about it with regards to alcohol and like toxins and stuff like that, but it's like one of the like it does like 200 or 300 kind of functions for us. Could you talk to us a little bit about what the liver is doing and like how we can take better care of it?
I would love to. The liver is, I think, the most fascinating organ. It is the only organ in the entire body that if you were to cut in half, it could completely regenerate when healthy. And there is an issue worldwide that's affecting everyone called fatty liver disease that is pretty much being underdiagnosed and often misdiagnosed. And most people walk around with it and don't even know what the liver does, how it helps their overall function. But the liver it does maybe four or five things really well. It was designed to, one, it was supposed to detox your brain. That's the first thing that most people don't even realize, that sleep and the liver are like the only two ways you can detox the brain. And so if you miss out on sleep, you better hope that you're not destroying your liver with a lifestyle that doesn't support it, right? And that brings me to number two. Your liver is like a refrigerator. And so it's stored all your drinks, your coffees, your sodas, your medications, your supplements, everything you've ever consumed, it's like a refrigerator. So it's still in there. And for some people, it's very hard for them to remove it, metabolize it, use it for energy, which is what the liver also does. It makes blood sugar and cholesterol. So you imagine when it comes to metabolism, things like insulin resistance is a big problem, prediabetes, heart disease, dementia. It's all involving the liver, because the liver, like I said, if you're lowering the risk of dementia, you need a healthy liver. And if you need healthy blood sugar and you want to like maybe lower the risk of diabetes, you want to make sure that your liver is not stored with a bunch of crap, basically. And so I think about the idea of like, how do we restore health, right? Well, most people have had digestive issues at one point. So I say, okay, if the liver is an issue, everyone has a fatty liver, are we doing this to ourselves? And genetics don't always help, but is there something we're missing? And I think the liver has a recipe that it needs in order to function, which means that you're not going to get it through DoorDash. You're going to have to like cook at it with it at home, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, garlic, onions, turmeric, avocados, salmon, sardines. Sardines are great for the liver. And if you look at the typical Western culture, you're not serving salmon and sardine drive-through. Like it just doesn't happen. And avocados just became a craze because everyone loves toast and they couldn't give up bread. So they had to make something healthier for their breakfast, right? And I tell people, just eat the avocado. That's way healthier. And people look at me like I'm crazy. But going back to the liver. So what's fascinating about the liver, I'm a family nurse practitioner. And so everyone needs help with their liver, but no one's talking about it. So if everyone needs help with their cholesterol, blood sugar, blood pressure, heart, and brain, I say, well, let's go to the liver, and the liver will help support all of these. So the IVs, every single IV supports the liver. all the vitamins, the nutrients, they all go into the liver and they help the liver function better. When that happens, you can see it in their eyes. You can see it in their skin clears up, they start losing weight, they poop better, they have more energy. And you people say, was it my liver all along? I'm like, well, having a sluggish liver doesn't help, but you don't want to wait too long to do something about it. And when you do something, you can see the results right away.
I'm glad you mentioned sardines and avocados because I had that for breakfast this morning. So I feel I feel like I've ticked a box there.
Really? That's awesome. That's amazing.
I had a question on. So you said about the liver being the only organ that can regenerate. If you were to cut it in half, if it's 50%, it can regenerate itself. So let's assume somebody has had an awful diet and not slept very well and done a bunch of things for decades, and their liver's damaged to, I don't know, let's say 60%. Is there still hope that by changing what they're doing, that their liver can still regenerate itself and start to function at that higher level?
I think there is a chance. I can say this now because I've seen in practice, which is very different than like reading about it online, right? Like even the research that comes out, there's no accelerated research for liver disease right now. They're just looking at liver transplants and stem cells, right? And peptides. But I have personally seen like people who have very chronic liver disease, like cirrhotic livers, if you will. And when they start supporting their liver through diet, supplements, lifestyle, what they show up with on the labs and in the imaging is there is improvement. What the doctors usually say is initially they say, well, it's not getting worse. We can tell it's not getting worse. In fact, it's actually kind of stopped. The inflammation is not as bad. It doesn't look like it's in as much trouble as it used to be. And what's fascinating is in my practice, that I've never been told this before. I've never been shown this, right? Any of the doctors or practitioners who've done this before me, they're kind of underground and there wasn't social media before then, right? So the idea like NAC, for example, NAC, let me just tell you this. So NAC is an amino acid. It's in the WHO's essential book of medications, right? Like it's worldwide and it's an over the counter supplement here in the United States. But if someone overdoses off of Tylenol, like Tylenol, right? Acetaminophen, you would destroy your liver. And if you get to the ER, they would give you an IV bag full of N-acetylcysteine. N-acetylcysteine is also, besides to help you recover from acute liver toxicity, it also helps you as a mucus thinner. And so just going back to this whole idea of like, it's still out there for us. No one's talking about it. I'm like, look, we should have podcast after podcast about NAC IVs and NAC supplements and how it can just basically regenerate the liver and maybe help with all these issues we have in society right now when it comes to metabolic health. But yet it's nothing new, right? And it doesn't cost $40,000. So like this doctor who just got out of Western medicine doesn't care because it was an old medication. They're like, no, it's all about the new stuff that costs $10,000. I'm like, no, it's not. It's about making sure we support your liver and you'll use whatever recipe you can, right?
It's crazy though because because the liver. I mean, this is standard. Like when you study the liver, like it will regenerate when it's healthy, and then there's a lot of newer like stem cell research that comes out, and when you add stem cells to them, it could even speed up the process. That's neither here nor there, but it's crazy to think about that. Like it has that ability, that organ has that ability to do that. Yet, like you have cirrhosis, and it's like in order to get to that, like there has to be a lot of damage for a long time for it to even get there, because or else it's trying to regenerate itself all the time, and so it's also not going to be like an overnight process. But yeah, like you said, like there is a chance because that's what it's designed to do, and you know, and nothing else can say that about itself. But yeah, that's the liver's function. It's pretty fantastic.
How can we kind of track it like in our daily lives? Should we be getting like, annual checkups? Is that something that folks who can visit your bar, like get like when you run, like, do you run a test on them or something? Like, how can we kind of monitor our liver health? Sounds super important.
Yeah, there's ways to do it. Labs is probably my favorite way to go about it because you take the guessing out of everything of what's going on, right? And you say, okay, I'm going to get some blood work done. And I promote yearly blood work, right? That way you stay on top of everything. And then what will happen is you measure your liver markers. There's a bunch of liver markers. Unfortunately, not all of them always get ordered. So you have to work with somebody who goes a little bit further and says, let's look at the bigger picture. And what will happen is you have data, which is objective data on top of that, right? And then if you want to take it a step further, there's imaging like ultrasounds and CT scans, MRIs, and that will tell you what's going on as well. And you can say, okay, I can track this. Now you have like kind of a plan, right? A protocol. Let's say I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to take these supplements. I'm going to do these IVs, or maybe I'll, do a couple other things, and then I'll recheck everything. Maybe 3-6 months later. Imaging doesn't have to be done that quickly, but you can see differences in just a few months. I've seen liver enzyme lab work decrease in as little as 2 weeks. So the liver is resilient. It's just like Baldo said, you have to imagine most people who go to the doctor, this is the most infuriating thing. They will be told, my liver was fine, or they didn't check my liver, or like, you know what, they weren't concerned because, like I said, there's no medication for the liver really. So they rather just remove the gallbladder, or they rather just say, hey, you have to have a gastric sleeve, or, or let's put you on Ozempic. And what's really, discouraging sometimes is I think people really want to know more information, right? If one people knew about the liver's importance, like it also regulates all your hormones. So if you wanted better testosterone, better estrogen, better thyroid, you would want a better liver. And a lot of people would be interested in knowing that, right? But if you were to go to people and say, hey, you're a thyroid issue patient, you're a diabetic, people aren't going to listen. Because what we've also found is people have high blood pressure, high blood sugar, they're diabetics, they don't care. What you have to really get to them is say, look, here's your labs. Do you want to be over here? When you're over here, you have better work performance. You have you can travel more. You have better weight. You have better energy, right? And that's really how we kind of address it with people. Is like, are you tired all the time? Yep, it might be your liver. Do you have bad skin? It might be your liver. Do you have poops that are off? It might be your liver. I mean, we had a fart video go viral again because all I said was, if you fart like 30 times a day, you might have liver issues because you're not supposed to fart 30 times a day. And the amount of comments, like,
How many times a day are you meant to fart out of interest?
it's probably less than 10. All right. So you imagine if it's like 30 times or 3 times as much, I'm like, something's up. And so what's fascinating is because the backlash almost triggered people, they quickly like they almost had to think about how many times they fart a day, right? Because I can tell you right now, I've been fasting for about 36 hours straight right now, and I haven't farted once. So, like, the second I eat something again, when I break my fast, if I don't fart right away, it's because, yeah, I ate an avocado or a can of sardines and I was able to digest it. You know what I mean?
I can see the Apple Watch now with a fart counter. Check your liver.
They should totally do that.
We just invented something right there. Golly.
Looking ahead, what's one trend in wellness you predict will explode in the next 5 years?
Man, I think we're already tapping a little bit into it with like all the like the auras and all that, and like sleep is still like the will always be the next frontier in a sense. Like you could always do better at sleep. I was I don't remember if I like took like a health course or if I went to a conference and the speaker was saying like sleep is the best health insurance you can buy. Like it does so much for you, right? And deep sleep helps you detox your brain, like with the help of the liver. And so I feel like that's the one that because I think people are sleeping worse and worse every day, especially when they're just on their phones all day and they're not getting deep sleep. And I think Laura reported that the amount of like deep sleep keeps declining on a year, like as far as like their overall data that they collect. And it's like, well, that's not cool. And so I imagine from a business standpoint, like I would think like that's the one where it's like, hey, let's do another company that helps more sleep. From that sense, and when there's more investment going into that, then it becomes a trend because like people are just talking about it. But like it's really honestly like just get some sunlight and eat some good food and like stay off your phone after 7 p.m. or something like that, and I think you're gonna get better sleep anyways.
No, I have to agree with Baldo. Wearable devices. I actually have two answers. I'll tell you what I think is going to happen and what I wish would happen. So, what I think is going to happen is I think wearable devices are going to be a bigger hit than what they really are right now. Because let's just take the Apple Watch for example. most of the time people just use it to track their calories and their steps. I don't use it for that. I would use it for my sleep. I would track my heart rate. I would check even my pulse ox, right? Which is really important after the last few years. So things like, oh, pulse ox. So like the last, since the pandemic, everyone was worried about your oxygen, right? Especially with all the ventilators and all that. So they basically wish in 2020 as a practitioner, I wish I could have seen everyone's pulse, like oxygen saturation, right? What is everyone's oxygen levels? Because if it drops, that's not good. Well, now with the Apple Watch, you can literally measure it while you're sleeping, while you're sitting. And there's all this, like, it's like a doctor on your wrist. And on top of that, too, there's this glucose reader that I'm wearing. And the glucose reader now you don't need a prescription for. So you can basically not be a diabetic and wear it. And what I think with this is this wearable device and then this one will tell me more than any doctor will, because I'm not going into the doctor to get my information. I'm just looking at my phone. The problem is that no one understands this information. So they just think it's calories and steps. So that's why I say there's going to be a disconnect and a holdup, but it's still headed that way because everyone's going all in on this. Now, what I wish really would happen, the trend would be that everyone talks about the liver and dopamine. The liver we talked about right now, right? Everyone should be, but not everyone cares enough. But we're going to make it to the point where everyone does care if we have to be on every podcast around the world. But then the dopamine aspect, I think with the rise of electronics, AI, and even the robots we have right now, you have selfless driving cars in Austin. You talk about community right now. I need to connect with humans. Okay. So you imagine the dopamine that's going to be missing from the lack of communication and connection with other humans. It's going to be interesting when it comes to mental well being. And I think in the future, mental wellness should be at the forefront along with liver. But because we haven't addressed mental wellness the right way to begin with, a lot of people are going to be suffering over the next decade or so. And that's why we're like proponents of anything you can do to get your dopamine up in a healthy way. We're all for, even if it means like you got to do cold plunge after cold plunge to do it, right? Like something's got to give.
That's a fascinating answer. That made me think of so many things. So you're an entrepreneur. We're all entrepreneurs. One thing I think we can relate to is if you've ever gone climbing before, like hiking, and you see like the summit, you're like, okay, just like 5 minutes, I'll be there. And you get there, you realize that wasn't the summit. You got to keep going. You got to keep going. And there's just always new lessons. It's a fluid thing. You're never done learning and growing and being challenged. And I think when it comes to progress, you mentioned like Austin and kind of this tech forward development with like driverless cars, et cetera. I think that can be great, but I think one thing we kind of forget about in our pursuit of one particular goal is how it helps the collective like species, if you will. So there's this kind of analogy with Vancouver, where I'm calling you from. I forget exactly like what the kind of what it's called, but they have this policy where any new building that comes up has to basically like they put it through and see like how does it affect the way that the city looks, because we want to see some mountains. We want it so every like 360 degrees. They want to see like, how does this help the overall skyline and the overall kind of vibe of the city? I think if we did that as a humans, like how does this help? Like, so if we take driverless cars and you don't have that like, nice chat with the driver, let's say, so then how do we augment that? Like, how are we building in community or health? Again, it may be pie in the sky, but I think that might be a trend that I'd like to see in the next 5 years, is kind of this responsible entrepreneurship or responsible city planning.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you brought that up. Baldo and I went to, we were fortunate enough to be invited to a Capital Consciousness networking group years ago, started by John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods. And what was interesting was being in a room full of corporates, big hitters. And they're talking like this was what, right after the pandemic, right, Baldo? Right?
I think it was 2021, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, 2021. And so they were talking about how business affected, them, how the pandemic affected their businesses. And remember 2021, it was very good for business. Corporate doing really well. Everyone was launching a product because everyone had money again and everyone could go out and go do something. What was really interesting is that there was still a disconnect because no one in that room mentioned all the people who got laid off and how the people had to change jobs, how that affected their well-being. And one guy coincidentally stood up and says, you got to remember, these people aren't numbers. These are actual people. They have families. They have livelihoods here. And it makes me think about why, like Baldo said, passion project, like why people even get up and become entrepreneurs to begin with. And in that room, I quickly realized there were people in there for the almighty dollar, And there are other people in there because they wanted to make a change in this world. And you quickly realize when you talk to entrepreneurs, you can only get to that change in the world if you basically create that path. And there's a lot of people who are going to help you along the way, either, directly or indirectly. But being in a room where you're not the smartest person is probably the best thing that you could ever learn from. And I learned so much from that meeting that day, to where like we take a look at where we're going forward. And it's very easy to align yourself with other people who are in the same mindset. And the conscious movement here in Austin, I mean, people create, I mean, look at Siete. Siete created a gluten-free, seed-free, chip because, there wasn't one. And they just sold for $2 billion to PepsiCo. And then last week, a prebiotic drink just sold for $2 billion. And it was a mom and pop basically who created out of their garage again because they said this would be a cool idea. And so to me, I love entrepreneurship, especially in like Austin, because you can't dream too small, right? You have to dream as big as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that from the entrepreneurship standpoint, and I mean, community is like such a fun part of like doing business, and especially like in Austin, like you get a lot of that. I told you earlier that like Austin's like, yeah, there's so many people here, over a million now, I think, but like the area that Austin is, kind of like Vancouver, is like it's small, so like it feels like there's collaboration, and I think that's something that we need to like tap into, like the collaborative aspect of entrepreneurship, because I think that like when you grow together, then you grow faster, I think, and you can learn from each other. And like that idea that like, oh, I don't want to, I don't want to share my secrets, in a sense, because I don't want someone to like beat me to the punch. It's like it's so like outdated, it doesn't get us anywhere. And I don't know that it pushes you either to like just be better if you're not sharing what's working for you and like those best practices. But I think that in the future, yeah, we'd love to see more community. John and I started we had a podcast called How Do You Health, and we just kind of like we use it as a networking tool, almost like, okay, let's interview this guy about health. And it quickly became a lot about entrepreneurship, because we tapped into the idea of like entrepreneurship, like health, right? Like, what are you doing to stay healthy while you're doing all that stuff? And sooner or later, we ended up throwing what's it called, a festival out of it, because it was during the pandemic, and because we have a clinic and a license, we were able to like rent a space, and like we were doing some clinical services like IVs and all that. So we were able to remain open during that time. And then quickly it just turned into like, well, let's invite like so and so, because like they can't do business right now, but like if they come and give a talk here, then they can share their love, their secrets. And it quickly became like, wow, like this is a lot of fun. So all of a sudden we said, why don't we do like a whole month of this? And we had like a month-long festival during that. And then next year and the following year, we ended up doing like proper 3-day festivals, and we brought in like scientists and all that stuff. But the main thing is that we incorporated play to everything. So it's like, hey, you saw that conference, let's go outside now. We're gonna go play this game together. And it was just a bunch of people, like over 200-300 people. We stopped doing that because it was just so much work, and like we have plenty of other things to do, and maybe at some point we bring it back. But like just the idea that like, why not community growing together, it's very important. It's probably like the most. It also makes it so much fun, and when things are fun, then there's no reason to like not do things.
I want to finish with that one thought, because he overlooked one big thing that was really important in that. So that festival that we threw, the thing was, it was supposed to be big attendees. There wasn't. It was like we got all the CEOs and they vendored and demoed their own like booths, which was really cool. Like it doesn't happen. So when that happened, you have CEO after CEO standing next to each other, like, have you met? Have you met? No, I haven't met. And all of a sudden, business ideas came out of it. Business ideas, groups, like $1 million deals were made. And we were watching it happen. And it was incredible because like the people were there because they were tired of going to events and expos and seminars for business. They wanted to go just for themselves to connect and network. And when we created that, it was like choreographed and curated. And it was really cool because, like I said before, entrepreneurs they're the hardest working people in the world, but they have burnout syndrome like everyone else. And at the end of the day, we did it because they needed just to talk to people and hang out with fellow colleagues and not just always be on. Just like, here's a chance to learn. If you don't want to learn, go jump in a pool full of ice, basically, and do a group ice plunge. And then we had everything was outside. Like, we didn't have it indoors because why would you want to be indoors the whole time? We're at a health conference, right?
Actually, now that I remember, another thing that we did is that we asked the vendors to get with another vendor and create, like, instead of just like each having a booth, which there was that because like you needed to go talk to them. It's like, hey, get with another vendor and create a little mini experience, right? So then you had like, yeah, and so then it kind of it made it forced it. Well, for us, it was like whoever's showing up is gonna think this is so much fun because like now for some reason like we had like teepees that were like full of red light with like sound therapy, and so it was like 3 or 4 different companies doing.
It's like Burning Man for health.
Yes, that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah, correct. And so and so it just became like like, and because of that, then you had new companies pop up, and honestly, like I wish we could go back to that, and maybe in the future, once we decide to like, hey, let's stop doing what we're doing, let's do this, because that just became such a big endeavor, and it was a lot of fun, and the thing is, like from everything that we've done, there's really just only 3 of us in the company that run like basically 3 companies, but and then we hire some like help here and there, but so we just felt like that was not the right path anymore, and but I think there's a need for it, so maybe in the future we'll go back to that.
So, for people listening or watching, some kind of quick wins from what I heard: get outside, exercise, get your sleep, get your blood work at least once a year. Maybe check out if you're already wearing devices. Maybe check out what they can do for you. And if you're down in Austin, come see you guys. Where would you like to point people, and what would you like your closing word to be? If there's anything that wasn't said that you'd like to mention.
I'm going to say go to nursedoza.com and go check out our online school where we teach live health classes every week. And we're creating like the Netflix of health and wellness. So you should go join that. And then my last statement, learn to appreciate everything. That's it.
Yeah, on that note, from the school standpoint, one of the things that we implemented was like where uh, Nurse Doza every Wednesday, I think was it noon, 1 p.m. Does a ask me anything, right? So it's like it's a way for us to open up to like anyone, because like the school is like $5 to start, like just, and so like instead of like doing like a whole appointment for an hour, because you don't even know what to ask sometimes, so sometimes like people are like, well, I could do a consult with him, but I don't even know what to ask. So it's like we'll show up to the ask me anything, and there's usually like 10, 15, 20 people on there. They all have like a similar question, and then they connect, and then you can ask the question, and you can decide later on if you want to like move forward or do more or not do more and stuff like that. So it's really, really accessible. But I would say, yeah, nursedoza.com is the place where you can see everything. It links to everything. There's also on his bio link a free 14-day liver reset course. It's free. Like, and you just get a brand new email every other day. So it tells you like quick little mini steps. You should do that. And I mean, other than that, is like make sure you make time for yourself. That's key for me.
Well, Baldo, Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your journey with us. We'll definitely be checking out your services and look forward to talking to you again, either online or in person.
Well, thanks for having us, David and Becky.
Awesome. Thank you so much.